Hello, I'm Roger Bisbee from the Skill Builder channel. Now, one of the things about running a YouTube channel is that people find you. Sometimes people find you long lost relatives, long lost friends, all that kind of thing. Lo and behold, John, who I went to junior school with, John?
I'm afraid it was infants, Roger.
It was infant school, so we've known each other well over 50 years.
Over 50 years, definitely. Well over, yeah.
He saw the YouTube channel, got in touch with me, and lo and behold, here we are, just down the road from where he now lives. A couple of old codgers sitting on the beach, and we're going to have a chat now. I'll just fill you in slightly on this. Our early days at school, and we had this double act where I stood on your shoulders, didn't I?
Yeah, now that would be 65 years ago.
That was 65 years ago when I was standing on his shoulders.
But that's it. That's because I was the stockier one, and of course Roger, being lithe and quite athletic, he was always on top.
Fast forward from there, and I came across John. I don't know quite where I found him, but we'd obviously lost contact, gone our separate ways after school, and then I came across him. And lo and behold, I was a plumber, he was a plumber.
But I met you in the Builders Merchants, Bourne and Co, as it was in Red Hill.
C.I. Bourne, yeah. We went, oh, well, it might be fun to do a bit of work together. We're both plumbers and so on, and so we started doing a few jobs together, didn't we?
We did, Roger, yeah, particularly underground mains. That's my recollection, and...
bit of digging.
Bit of digging, yeah.
It was hard to find mugs to do digging in those days, wasn't it?
Digging for gold, it was, and a lot of it by hand.
It was all by hand, wasn't it?
Almost always. I would be pleading for a Kango, and Roger would say, "Oh no, we'll get better in a minute."
Punch it out.
We did 100 metres in one go. Put a whole 100-metre coil in the ground off a road in South Godstone, actually, A22, and we were pickaxe and shovel through the hard stuff towards a lawn, and I said, well, nearly at the lawn, and I thought, oh, thank goodness for that. And when we got to the lawn, we discovered that lawn had been laid on top of a load of hogging. So we had to give in, go and get the Kango on hire, and go up the lawn.
We got up every morning, I crawled across the bedroom floor, put my clothes on, and we went out for another day's digging.
The pain.
And I remember in the end of the week, we took the money and we counted it out in the pub, didn't we?
Always remember that. Yeah, a pint of Guinness each, and there it was on the table. 50-50 split.
So John, I want you to be honest, because you said to me that you don't mind telling people what happened then, but we did a couple of jobs. We did a few jobs together. The underground mains were easy, I think. You know, hard work, but fairly straightforward. And then you took on this job that I didn't like the look at. It was an awkward old job, and I just didn't have my heart in it. And I said to you, John, don't do it. We can do other stuff in our life, but I didn't want to do that job, but you, for some reason, felt slightly obliged to do the job. Maybe you knew the people or whatever. But got sucked into it, and I said to you, "You're on your own, mate. Yeah, you do it on your own. I don't want to know about this one." Which, fair enough. You know, it wasn't a divorce. And what happened then?
In those days, we would basically do anything. We centred around plumbing, but we would paint a house. Not we together necessarily, but we would have to, by necessity, be prepared to do most things if the money was there. And I was asked through somebody I knew to do this loft conversion, put a bathroom into it, and unfortunately, right in the middle of it, not because of it, I had a relapse of a existing mental health condition, and I ended up being hospitalised. Roger, by default, ended up picking up the pieces for me, and for which I'm entirely ever grateful. There was a need, I think, for a certain bit of consultation, one might add, and so one of the big things that sticks in my mind was being in the hospital, semi-secure, and Roger coming ostensibly to visit me coming out for a little ride out in the back of his old Honda van, covered in his dust sheets, lying all over his very uncomfortable spanners, so that he could run me down a few miles to the town where the job was for me just to make a couple of points about it, and then he took me back to my secure accommodation.
It's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Have you ever seen that film where they take the whole team out on a boat one day, complete with hookers? We didn't have any hookers.
No, not that day, no.
Not, but there we go. So I think after that we lost contact, didn't we, really?
We did, really, because I was advised to take a regular job.
Who advised you to take the regular job?
The medics,
the psychiatric doctor,
the people. Generally speaking, it was thought that it may be less stressful for me to get into a regular work pattern, because my diagnosis in those days, all of these things are to do with pigeonholing people, but effectively you need structure and you need regular hours. Very difficult for self-employed people, whatever you might think of builders, etc., to keep it on track as a self-employed person is not easy, particularly when you're largely on your own. Although we collaborated, which is actually what we did, we collaborated on selective jobs, but you are on your own. And back then, more on your own, I think. Well, maybe it's no
you
different
are, because
now,
you
but
didn't have social media.
No,
that you got
no,
now
nothing
you
like
can
that,
go
no.
on to all the different social media platforms, ask somebody a bit of advice, have a laugh and a
That's
go
right.
with somebody. There
That's
you
right.
were. If you
mobile
were
phones.
bogged down on that job in
That's
that
right.
tiny loft on your own,
That's right.
it gets very bleak. And then you've got the other problem of you've got a lady at home, very nice wife you've got, who wants some money at the end of the week, doesn't she?
That's
You know?
right. So that does come into play.
Yeah.
So anyway, I took the advice, and much to Roger's horror at the time, I went and worked for a timber merchant, and in the timber yard. It was winter time, and quite often the sawn timber would be stuck together by ice.
Yeah.
And Roger must have thought I was very refined, which I suppose compared to him I am, because I remember him saying to me, a word of caution, John, you know, where you were going to go to that yard at Newson's in Reigate, he says, dodgy blokes working in there, John, you might not be very happy. I always remember him saying that. You don't
the advice
remember
I gave you, I don't know what I was talking about. I
Yeah.
You still don't, as many people would tell you.
Well, he was
tell me.
Yeah, he was quite right. Bunch of they were all right,
Yeah,
but you know, effectively you're handing over control when you become an employee. But after getting better, we moved away from the area. That's really when Roger and I lost touch. So that would probably, it's hard for me to put dates on these things, but going by the age of our youngest son, I would say that's about 40 years ago.
All right, so what happened to you after that then?
Well, funnily enough, we moved away. We were in Surrey at the time, and I moved up to Northamptonshire. We had a terrific
That's no man's land, isn't it?
immediate, well, that's what you told me at the time. You said, what do you want to go up there for? I ended up with another merchant, as it happens, and I got involved in bathrooms, kitchens, that's it. So I worked for who were then UBM, and I ran their kitchen and bathroom showroom in Northampton. I guess, I don't know why it happens or when it happens, but at some point the call of the wild, so to speak, gets you. And I set up a little outfit called Interiors Complete, and I did a lot of complete kitchens, bedrooms and bathrooms.
So you went back to being self-employed.
Yeah, I did.
figured you'd kind of stabilised in terms of your mental condition or whatever, and you went back and started the stress of being self-employed
I
again.
did, yeah. That's right.
On your own, or do you have people working for you?
I did some initially on my own, and then a guy who also worked for the merchant, he came with me.
So you managed to seduce him, pull him away from the merchant?
Yeah, but he and I operated as, well, I guess it would be a partnership, although it wasn't, I don't think it was ever declared as registered officially as a partnership. And that brought us up to one of the big housing crashes of 89, 90. We had done quite well at that point and had a bit of funds. My wife is from Trinidad in the Caribbean, and we had enjoyed various visits to Trinidad and Tobago. And another friend of mine and I had designs on building a hotel over there, which we came very close to. We had a lot lined up with the Trinidadian High Commission in London. Anyway, it didn't happen. And then came the housing crash. I always remember in 1989, my mother travelling through, as they often did, and would stay for a couple of days with us in Northampton. There was a housing boom, it was 89. We had somebody knock on the door when my mother was in the house. At the time, offered us £106,000 for our house. And my mother, who had no background in anything like that, she said, "Sell it, John." Like that.
Yeah.
And within months, maximum a year of that house was sold for 56,000.
Was it?
And we came out of that with a cheque for £1,200. That's where we were at. So I've been sort of backwards and forwards a bit in life. Anybody who's in trouble, keep your chin up. It always gets better. So anyway, Fortunately, I've got, as Roger's mentioned already, I've got perhaps one of the most loyal and understanding wives any man could wish to have.
And she also makes a good cake, as I found out this morning.
Baked a cake for him coming.
Oh, mate, was that as a way to get to my heart?
She said,
superb cake. I'm getting the recipe for it. That's how good it is.
If I'd known you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. So anyway, she sick to death of the changes that were afoot within the NHS. She's a nurse. She came from Trinidad and trained. Came in '69, did her training. Anyway, what happened was she took over the managership, if you like, a warden in a sheltered housing scheme. We were enabled, in financial difficulties, to move into accommodation in West London, in Richmond actually. We let the house go. I think that's the best thing we did. And we had really 10 plus very good years there.
So what were you doing in the meantime?
Well, initially, I have to say, I had probably about a year being fairly down.
Really depressed.
And having to fight that really, which is a recurring thing. But I got myself pulled together, got myself a van, and off I went. Largely, again, just working on my own, jobbing plumbing really. And I also incorporated, slightly unusually, window blinds.
Oh, yeah,
because that gave me a product. Two branches of the business really. But by not having the pressure, my wife had a regular income, we were accommodated, and I had access to the West London property market, so to speak, without having to struggle with the overheads of living there. It was a fabulous time. I met a lot of good people and enjoyed it, actually.
There's a bit of money around there, around Richmond Park.
There was, but same old story, Roger. You know the old story. Never charged enough. Funny thing about this, it's a self-esteem thing. It's knowing your own worth. Now, the best thing that happened was our son, David, he came and he worked with me for a spell. He was a teenager, started off by typing invoices, but very soon he would adjust the invoices.
He put a bit more on. Do you know what? It's my wife all over.
He would put it on, say, "Oh no, that's not enough."
Slipping the key on the typewriter.
Yeah. Always, he would always be upping it because I would never know the value of my work.
Jill used to say to me, "How much was that job you did this morning?" And I'd say, "Oh, it's 25 quid." So she'd go, "Oh, I'll just type the invoice for him, 35 quid."
Yeah.
You know, straight away, and nobody ever balked at it. So you know, keep the women away from the keyboard, and you get a cheaper job. I say, you know.
Yeah.
So he was the one who tinkered with the money, and he had a bit of nous, yeah?
He did, but he didn't stay with me. We didn't have any sort of falling out or anything. It wasn't like that, but he moved on. He ended up being my boss, so I ended up working for him.
Right, so what, he got a company together?
He did. He had a modern apprenticeship with BP. He's now director of a company of analytical chemists who are principally involved in oil and gas. It all came to an end for me really, an abrupt halt, my self-employed working career. I had a heart attack, unfortunately.
How old were you then?
49.
49, you had a heart attack.
That was in 2003.
Your dad died of a heart attack.
He did.
As well.
He did.
I remember your dad as well. He was a scaffolder, wasn't he?
He was a scaffolder. He was. Well, he was started off as a scaffolder. He and his brother, my uncle, they were Big Ben. They worked for, and they were sent to Brussels in 1958, flown there as scaffolders to work on the American Pavilion. So they were top flight scaffolders, but he liked a pint, and so a lot of the scaffolding revenue never came home. But what a guy! Like Roger said, a very hard area of work. Scaffolding still is. Yeah, he was 45 when he died. He was very much into form work then, concrete work, and scaffolding was in the way of his progress one Monday morning, and being a scaffolder, he went up and struck the scaffold and had a heart attack on the roof of a building in Crawley.
So while he was working, he had a heart attack?
Yeah.
Ooh.
So that was catastrophic, and as it turned out, me at 49, when they got into me, they simply couldn't believe I was walking about, and they had a look in there for a possible stent, and it was totally out of the question. The cardiologist who would apply a stent just shook his head and said, "Can't do anything here." So I had an emergency quadruple bypass. That's 49.
That's a bit of plumbing work for you, isn't it?
Well, funny, I have to tell you a very funny story about that, because the registrar, the consultant surgeon's registrar, it was an international effort. I had Mario Petru, who was the consultant, Pedro Catarino, who was his registrar, and Mr. Lee, who was the man who harvested the donor vessels. So we had
Where did they come from? Your arm?
Well, one from my arm. There's always usually take the mammary from from your breast. The mammary artery is the primary bypass.
Yeah.
My arm and 2 from my legs. Pedro Catarino and I, we hit it off big style. He and I became great pals, and he said to me, "Why is it?" He said, "Why is it?" He said, "I've tried." He said, "I've done a bit of plumbing." He said, "The thing is," he said, "when we do we get that vessel in and we sew it in. It kind of leaks a bit, but it heals up." He said, "I've been, I've tried doing those joints and that at home. They don't heal up."
Wasn't using enough jointing paste on it.
I said, "I'll have to show you how to do that."
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So that's what happened.
So he's a surgeon, top flight surgeon.
Yeah.
We hope he was a top flight surgeon.
Yeah,
and he was
certainly
doing
was.
his own plumbing at home.
So I went from being a guy who, as I said to Roger earlier, I summarily dismissed a gang of cowboy builders from Catford off a job in Kensington one day, fearlessly, foolishly. Yeah. Not long after that, I was discharged from the Royal Brompton under the instructions that you're not to pick up anything heavier than a kettle full of water. When you're a happy-go-lucky, with a touch of depression, but generally happy-go-lucky, having a drink at the end of the day and so on, and not being entirely financially sensible, suddenly being cut off in your prime like that is quite a hit. And a saving grace for me was aforementioned son David, who became absolutely supportive of my wife and I. And I ended up, what happened was, in my convalescence, there was a scheme. I was on an invalidity benefit. You could work 16 hours and retain your invalidity benefit, which I think was about £65 a week I had, something like that. My son and his partners, for whom I had equipped their laboratory before I was ill, they said, "Well, John, why don't you come work for us?" And did those 16 hours, and it got me back into work. Within a year, 18 months of that, I was working as hard as I ever did, and fortunately, by a complete shoehorn, my plumbing abilities and my technical bent lent itself at the time perfectly to dovetail into the handling of high pressure sampling cylinders.
Oh, right.
Something that they had to do, and they were struggling with, to be quite frank. I seized upon that, and that's what happened. So
you were
I got
plumbing
into
up
that.
the cylinders to do tests on them or whatever?
Yeah, it was effectively, that's what I did, but I also just got very involved in the sampling, because although they had diversity more so then, they just gradually became principally involved in oil and gas, refineries, offshore work. I wasn't allowed offshore, but I could function quite well onshore. And I got very involved in the sampling, Roger, and making all sorts. I've got things. This is things you haven't seen yet. Making analytical apparatus and incorporating.
So like a lab technician, you would call yourself, or not?
Yeah, well, I was. My title was I was a technician, but it's not really a lab technician as such. But yes, you could say that.
So we talked about your plumbing career.
Yeah.
But you kind of went into general building as well, yeah? I've
Not-
seen you
not
sort
too
a few
crazy,
jobs
see.
out, for people around, you were telling me about some glass balustrading the other day that you had to go and sort out for somebody. You come across a few of those type of jobs, haven't you?
I have come across a few jobs.
It'd be fair to say you could turn your hand to
Most things, yeah. I was saying from the very word go, the general abilities, if you like, multi-trade, or some people don't like this. However, by necessity, I think the era that Roger and I came into it all from, you turned your hand to where you were going to get a day's money.
Yeah.
I think that's fair, isn't it?
Plumbing, crawling about under floorboards, in lofts, all that kind of stuff. Every so often, the sun's shining outside, somebody needed their house painting or something like that. I think, let's go and do that, So long as the money was there.
That's it.
Okay, it wasn't the best paint job in the world, maybe, but nobody really saw it. They drove past it. It was up a ladder. You were away from close examination with a microscope or a magnifying glass. So as far as I was concerned, I could rub down the paintwork, put a couple of coats on it, have a couple of weeks in the sunshine, get my money, and it didn't worry me that I was a painter instead of a plumber.
You've just touched on something, Roger, which I must say is something about, and that is leading up where I've done refurbishments and bathroom installations, and also like a general refurbishment of an upmarket flat, for instance, which involves the bathrooms and all of that sort of thing. When I sort of ended up going back on my own, I resolved at one point that I would no longer get involved in something that had to be brought to a finish, because the bringing something to a finish is the most difficult aspect of any construction. You have to be aware of your finish from the very first moment you do something. You're thinking about that final tile going in place. You should be when you're putting your subfloor in. It's like that. You need to think ahead. And one of the things that I've found across the industry is there's an awful lot of people involved in it who don't have the ability to think ahead. But there we are. It does happen. You'll see a lot of people at work, or I did, who would be sort of working on top of themselves rather than thinking ahead. But that's really what happened to me. I made a decision that it's a difference between the objective and the subjective. If the pipe is fixed and it's correctly done and it doesn't leak, it doesn't leak. That's not really open to discussion. If that grout line could be a bit thinner or a bit thicker, and then that's where it becomes difficult.
So what are you doing now, John? You're retired? Or what?
Well, I'm still on the payroll as it happens. I mean, ostensibly retired.
Right, so
I don't really much.
You're doing a bit.
Well, I get asked now and again to comment. I get asked, but really, I have to say I am pretty well retired. I had a relapse with the heart. I was on my way to Norway to a job in Norway. I had my wife with me as it happens. I was just taking the equipment for a job we were doing in Norway. I was taking it via Dover because all the Scandinavian ferries are finished, and I got as far. Yeah,
you can't get over anymore.
No,
to Bergen or whatever.
No, none of that.
Wow.
All a thing of the past, Roger. Anyway, I got as far as Bremen in North Germany, where I had a heart attack, but my maker was looking after me yet again, thank you, and I turned out where I was that morning was within 20 minutes of one of the top cardiac clinics in Germany. As it happens, and it was fantastic. I got a stent fitted. It was the radial artery from my arm that had been a graft developed a thrombosis, and that's what happened there. Fantastic help. I had my life saved, and I had the most fantastic treatment in London, in the Brompton, in 2003, and in 2017 I had similar in Germany. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to be here.
So you recommend any hospital beginning with a B, do you?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Brompton.
But where are we going to go next? Bangkok?
Yeah, well, yeah. I'll be careful what I say about that. But it's another place in the world that I do like, because I have taken the chance of a lot of travel. So anyway, there you are. So that's me. But
well, it's great to see you, John, after all these years, and you know, we'll keep in touch.
Roger. Who would ever have thought it, eh? I just say let's try not to leave it another 45, shall we not?
No, I think we better.
Yeah.
If you've got an interesting story to tell us, contact us in the comments below. We're always interested in life experience, as they now call it. Used to just be called experience.